Ed, did you and Nora coordinate? That's pretty good.
We talked about it this morning.
It's nice.
I called it the singing version. It's an act.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming to the White House for your daily briefing. Before I take questions, I'd like to give you a brief readout of the President's lunch that ended not long ago with leaders of the House and Senate of both parties. I spoke with the President afterwards. It was a constructive and cordial meeting over lunch. It was the President, the Vice President, and the four leaders. They discussed a variety of topics, a range of topics, both domestic and foreign. And they discussed ways that they could build on the bipartisan cooperation that led to the extension of the payroll tax cut as well as unemployment insurance. I think it's fair to say that, as we've been saying for a long time, and the President has been saying, that there is reason to hope that the conventional wisdom that holds that Congress held by the opposition party, or largely controlled by the opposition party, cannot get any business done with the President in an election year is wrong, and that if folks focus on the areas of agreement and work in a cooperative, bipartisan fashion, we can advance the American people's agenda. The President looks forward to doing just that and to continuing his conversations with the leaders of the House and the Senate. With that, I'll take your questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay. Two topics. I'll pick up on that one to start. We got a pretty upbeat readout from the Speaker's office about how the meeting went, including the talk of the Speaker being encouraged by what the President had to say about the Jobs Act, and that Speaker Boehner would be happy to work with the President on a true all of the above energy policy. Your readout there sounded pretty upbeat as well. Was there a specific legitimate agenda that you believe came out of this, items that the American people can look to say those are actually likely to get done?
Well, I don't want to get into specific pieces of legislation or itemize the topics. I think, as we talked about yesterday, I said, and we put out a statement from Amy Brundage about the House Republicans' Jobs Act, what they call their Jobs Act, and elements within it that overlap considerably with the President's priorities, and in fact echo the very things that the President brought up first in his speech in September when he put forward his American Jobs Act. He repeated those very same areas in terms of small business, assistance to small business in his State of the Union address, and again last week when he signed the payroll tax cut extension. So certainly there is reason to hope that if Congress can focus on resolving some differences, that we could get some progress in that arena or that area. And as for energy policy, the President stressed that he will continue to focus on an all-of-the-above approach. And an all-of-the-above approach does not mean just drilling. It includes drilling. And as you know, since President Obama took office, domestic oil and gas production has continued to increase to a point where we're now at an 8-year high. And the President's very committed to continuing to expand domestic oil and gas production safely and responsibly. But he knows, and it's important that politicians be responsible and acknowledge that if drilling were the answer, we would not see the spikes in oil prices that we see, because we have been expanding oil drilling, and we saw global oil prices spike up last year, and of course they are doing so again now. We need to take an all-of-the-above approach. And that all-of-the-above approach includes renewable energy sources. It includes investments in innovative clean energy technologies. It includes approving the construction of the first nuclear power plant in the United States in 30 years, as well as developing more areas of domestic oil and gas production.
On that specific point of oil drilling, did the Republican lawmakers pressure the President again on the Keystone Project, and if so, what came of that discussion?
I don't want to get into specifics. It was a cordial and constructive meeting. The President, as you know, as we made clear, welcomes the decision by TransCanada to construct the pipeline from Cushing, Oklahoma to the Gulf of Mexico. That will relieve a bottleneck that has formed in Cushing and allow oil to get to refineries and to market. And he certainly, we acknowledge that, and TransCanada has said that it intends to resubmit or submit a new application for a permit to build its cross-border pipeline, Keystone XL. I would simply say, as I said yesterday, that calls to approve Keystone XL right away, again, are insulting to the American people because there is no permit to approve. There is no pipeline route to review. And when there is, it will be reviewed by, if an application is submitted and a new route is identified, it will be reviewed in accordance with the process that's been in place for many administrations and many years, and will be done by the book. And the decision that the President made in January, because Republicans decided to play politics with this and force a decision before proper review could be conducted, was made without prejudice on the merits of the project. So, I mean, that's how we view Keystone. But I think it's important, too, as I said yesterday, that anybody out there who's telling his or her constituents that approval of Keystone will somehow lower the price of gas at their local gas station is blowing a lot of smoke.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about North Korea as well and the developments there, and try to get the President's thoughts on two fronts. Do you see this as a legitimate breakthrough? And how do you know if you can trust anything coming from Kim Jong-un?
Well, that's a very good question. This is something that we consider, these are concrete measures that we consider a positive first step toward complete and verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in a peaceful manner, which remains this administration's core goal. The agreements that the North Koreans have made are very welcome, but obviously they need to be followed up by actions, and commitments to do something are one thing, actually doing them are another. So we will pursue this policy area with that approach in mind. So again, a positive first step. This is certainly a notable development, but we need to focus on actions as well as agreements and statements.
And what does it mean for the resumption of six-party talks?
Well, this is a step towards that, but again, I think it will depend on actions that the North Koreans take to demonstrate their that they are upholding the agreements that they've made.
Thank you.
Yes.
Jay, can you talk about the timing of the meeting with congressional leaders, why this came about now? And also, although both sides are upbeat, isn't it kind of a sign of the partisanship and the fighting between the two parties that there has not been a meeting of this kind since July?
Well, I'd say two things about that. One is that there has certainly been communication between the President and the leaders of the House and the Senate in the last in the time since they last sat down together. I think last summer and spring were notable for the high number of hours that the leaders spent together with the President as they tried to work out, avert a government shutdown in the spring, and work out an agreement on deficit and debt reduction in the summer. As for this meeting, it was an opportunity, as the President saw it, to meet with the leadership at the beginning of this year. It was useful to do it after Congress acted on the President's highest priority for the beginning of the year, which was ensuring that the payroll tax cut was extended so that 160 million Americans didn't see their taxes go up tomorrow. And having done that, it was an opportunity for the President to meet with the Republican and Democratic leaders to talk about other areas where we can cooperate and work together to help grow the economy, enhance job creation, and in general pursue the American people's agenda. So I think that is a good way of looking at the timing of this particular meeting.
And in your answer to Ben on energy policy, it's clear that you and the Republicans are still very far apart on that issue in particular. So what specifically leads to this optimism? Is there anything on energy policy where you actually found common ground other than both agreeing that it's a problem?
Well, again, I think there's Keystone and sort of the political posturing around that, but then there are certainly other areas within the realm of what the president describes as his all of the above approach to energy policy, where there should be opportunities for agreement in enhancing America's energy security and energy independence. The president will continue to pursue his approach, but he will he welcomes the opportunity to look at other people's ideas, and if they make sense, then he'll certainly gladly work together in a bipartisan way to get them done. I think that the constructive and cordial nature of the meeting today, encompasses an array of issues, not just energy, but certainly energy was discussed.
And in North Korea, are you drawing any conclusions about what the direction of the new leadership is in North Korea based on this announcement today?
Well, we believe that it is a positive sign that in a relatively short period after the change of leadership in North Korea, that the DPRK decided to re-engage with the United States in substantive discussions and to take some positive initial steps. Now, our starting point is we expect continuity in behavior from the North Korean leadership, but since, that it is also the case that the new leadership has agreed to take specific confidence-building measures, which were announced today, and we view that as a positive step. Again, as I mentioned earlier, these are agreements that have been made, and it is important for the North Koreans to follow through on them and to act in accordance with the agreements that they made. But I certainly agree with the assessment that this is a positive first step. Jake, and then I'll move it around. Yeah.
Another energy company that took a significant loan, accepted a significant loan from the Obama administration, Abound Energy, announced it would be laying off some workers. And I was wondering if the White House had any reaction to that, and whether the White House feels as if any of these investments were made without sufficient diligence into the business venture.
Well, I would refer you to the Department of Energy for specifics about any particular loan. I would say broadly that it is inherent within these kinds of investments that there is risk, and Congress recognized that risk, which is why they put aside $10 billion in loan loss reserves, $10 billion in loan loss reserves when they created the program. But just because there is risk, President Obama believes that we should not just throw up our hands and cede these industries to the Chinese or the Spanish or any other country. These are technologies and industries that will be very important in the 21st century, very important to the potential for the United States to become more energy independent, and we need to aggressively pursue them. And again, with regards to any particular loan or company, I would refer you to the Department of Energy. As for, we have said and maintain that the loans that were made were made on a merit-based basis, and will continue. That continues to be the case. But for specifics, I would refer you to DOE.
Okay. And then, in light of the president's pending speech at APEC and the visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu, I was talking to a national security expert who was telling me that he didn't think that there had been enough of a discussion of